rumors about, conveyor systems and in the area. So anyway, certainly if the assembly wanted us to come back with legislation outside the Port District, we could do so. But for the time being, we're dealing with the current issue we have, within the port.
Okay. Assemblyperson Howard.
More of a comment than anything else, but I think our conditional use permit code is full of things that you would never think somebody would want to put in the middle of a residential neighborhood, and they thought it was a good idea. And then we have a rule because it's not a good idea without some restriction on it. So I don't think too many pipelines are going to get built, but this seems like a good idea to do it in an industrial area.
Assemblyperson Hale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was just going to say pretty much the same thing. You'd be surprised at what people might try to put through a residential neighborhood. So,
Okay. Any further discussion by the assembly? Yes, Assemblyperson.
Yeah, when I looked
McKee.
at that, and I'm thinking we're looking at a port that at the moment pretty much non-existent, and the way I look at this thing, the history that I read and where we're going forward on this, if we're going forward, why are we doing this now? Because we don't have a port authority, we don't have a conveyor.
Through the mayor to Assembly Member McKee. As I said, we are currently actually working with a petroleum storage and distribution firm out in the Port District. And this is an issue we're running into with regard to placement of transmission lines within the Port District. If we want to go along a road or across a road, it throws us into a variance process. Again, because the port is an industrial area, we think it makes sense not to have a variance for these pipelines under the roads only in the port.
Are those the folks that are, is there a tank farm or something? Is that part of what you're talking about out there?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right, that makes sense. Thanks.
Okay, follow up for Assemblyperson McKee, do you have follow up? Yeah. Okay. No, yeah.
I just wanted to add the tank farm's not there yet, but they've been leasing from us for a long time and they're going to build the tank farm. So I think it's great. I'm excited. These guys own tank farms in other parts of Alaska and they want to do business with the Matsu Borough. This will help make it a little bit easier. So I think we all want to see the port bring in more business. And if you look right across the water there I worked at the tank farm across there when I was 18, 19, 20 as a kid. And I can't imagine they'd be able to do anything that they do if they had setbacks everywhere, right? So it's kind of a messy spider web of pipes when it's all said and done with. And I'm excited to know that we're going to hopefully in the near future have our first tanks over there. So I think this is just going to make it easier. All this is doing is making it easier for staff moving forward to be able to help them get that done and get that designed and anybody else in the future too. So thanks.
Further discussion by the assembly? Okay, is there any objection? Okay, hearing no objection, the legislation passes. Madam Clerk?
Ordinance 2216, an ordinance accepting and appropriating additional funds for the Matsu Borough Fish Passage 2025 grant to design and construct fish passage culvert replacements. With accompanying resolution 2211, a resolution approving the scope of work and budget for the Matsu Fish Passage 2025 project to design and construct fish passage culvert replacements.
Okay, and here comes the staff report.
Terry Dolan, Director of Public. This is additional federal grant money coming to us through the state of Alaska. The Assembly has already set aside match money for this. It's a 50-50 match, so the match is available, and this is just authorizing us to accept that.
Okay. Okay, with that, then I will open the public hearing on ordinance 22-016 and resolution 22-011. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to testify in this public hearing? Okay, I don't see anybody. Do we have anyone online, sir? No. Okay. So I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. And Deputy Mayor?
I move to adopt ordinance 2216 and resolution 2211.
Okay. What did I do? Oh, okay. Go ahead, sir. Assemblyperson Yant?
Just quick question through the mayor to Mr. Dolan, about how many culverts a year have we been doing and how long? I've only been here for a year and a half, and I could tell you, I've already seen a positive impact on this, but out on Cloudy Lake, I just finished a house for a client out there, and I've got some friends that lived out there for the last 5-6 years, never seen a salmon in that lake in 5-6 years. And then we replaced the culvert here recently, and this year they had hundreds in there. So I want to say, I honestly believe this is probably the best money we spend, or match money that we've been doing in our community. And I got a question, is about how many of these a year are we doing? So give or take. for
Through the mayor,
culverts.
we do right around 3 of these a year, depending
Yeah.
on the year. And the last one we did, as soon as we put the culvert in and opened it up, there was literally salmon spawning right in the mouth of the culvert. So
Instant.
that's how
Yeah.
quick it happens.
That's what I mean. It's instant. So I have a question then. Is that 3 or so a year because we're limited on match money? Or is that because, is there a long list? Is there an identified list of 20, 30, 40, 50 culverts that we could do? Fish are a very valuable resource to our community. And if we're delaying it because we're waiting on match money, I'd like to know, because if we are, I would hope to see some more money in the budget.
So through the mayor, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, along with Alaska Fish and Game, have already identified all of the various barrier culverts throughout the borough and all around the state. They spread this money around the state. Some of the fish passage projects that have been done over in TELEPHONIc this last year, our port benefited from, because Cruise Construction used our port to mobilize out there, that kind of stuff. So we're seeing it happen kind of all over the state. I think we probably could get additional federal money if we had additional grant money. I say I think, it just depends on the year. In this year, it seems like the federal government has extra money for these programs. But I couldn't guarantee that.
Does Fish and Game have an identified list for the Matsu Borough that would show, like, we have 10 culverts left to do, or 50 or 100? Is there a list that we could get?
There certainly is a map that shows all of those. I probably could get it for you in list form.
Yep.
And what they typically do is they pick out a group of about 25 that we work on until we get completed. We finished the last group of 25, I think, 2 years ago, and we're on the next group now.
Awesome. That's all I got. Thank you.
Assemblyperson Hale?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As someone who has built probably scores of these, I just wanted to congratulate the clerk on saying fish passage 4 times fast. It's a very difficult thing to say.
For the discussion by the assembly. Yeah, yes.
Yeah, I have a question for Mr. Dolan. What's the price tag on this thing? And then, like, obviously, then in 50-50 match, what are we up for?
Through the mayors, the price tags on individual culverts really varies widely depending on the size of the stream and what's
Yeah.
required to allow fish passage. I've seen some as small as right around $200,000,
That's small.
and others, just the pipe alone will cost us $250,000. It just depends on the size that's necessary for the site.
And so I don't know how these processes go, but would we, when there's something that comes up like that says, okay, now we're going to do this and this is the money for it, is that something that we would then?
So what typically happens is U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and Department of Fish and Game have established priorities basically by how big of a barrier particular pipes are, or based on a particular waterway that they would like to open up for fish passage. And they'll focus their efforts on those high priority locations. And we just go location by location, depending on what their priorities are.
Okay. All right.
I guess the other thing I would say to Mr. Yant is that in terms of them giving us additional money, I can tell you that U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service likes the Matsu Borough executing these projects because we execute their money quickly. And when their money's executed, they typically can get more.
Further discussion by the assembly. Okay, we already have a motion, right? Is there any objection? Okay, seeing no and hearing no objection, the legislation passes. The next item on our agenda is audience participation. Oh, did I miss one? Oh, okay.
Ordinance 22017, an ordinance
you.
accepting and appropriating an additional $210,000 from the Alaska State Department of Transportation and Public Facilities to Fund 480, project number 4038, Regional Transportation Organization for the performance of Pre-Metropolitan Planning Organization planning efforts with accompanying resolution 2215. A resolution approving the amendment number 2 to addendum A and B, approving the scope, work, and budget and schedule of the memorandum of agreement between the Alaska State Department of Transportation and the Borough to continue the Pre-Metropolitan Planning Organization planning activities.
Thank you. Is there a staff report? Yeah.
Good evening, Mayor DeVries and members of the Assembly. So the legislation before you tonight is to accept a third round of funding from the Alaska Department of Transportation to continue to support the pre-MPO development activities. So the last 2 years, they've given us $100,000. This year, they bumped it up because we're in the home stretch, assuming that we are designated as an urbanized area in April. We will have 1 year from that designation to stand up an MPO, give all of our documents to the governor, and then he will form the MPO or she will form the MPO. So with this funding, we intend to hire a project staff person to assist planning staff. We will retain consulting services to help also organize all these documents. We'll implement our public participation plan. We will finalize the operating agreement for the MPO, which will look at what are the bylaws for the organization, what's the boundary going to be, finalize all the intergovernmental agreements between the cities, the tribes, the borough, bike and pedestrian advocates and transit providers. And then we will continue to facilitate the monthly pre-MPO steering committee meetings that are mostly staff from those organizations, and then the pre-MPO policy board meetings. So the steering committee will draft documents and recommend approval, and they will flow up to the pre-policy board. So all of that work will happen. Hopefully by September, we will submit the operating agreement to the governor and then wait to see if, when they form the organization. So that's what these grant funds will be used for.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, through the mayor, will the Assembly have a chance to review the operating agreement before it goes to the governor?
Mhm.
I just making
Yeah,
sure.
through the mayor to Assemblymember Sumner. So once the operating agreement, it has a bunch of pieces to it. Once it's finalized in draft form, then we will bring it to the Assembly and we'll ask for a resolution of support for that document. We'll also do the same thing. We'll go to the cities and we'll ask and DOT and the tribes, whoever's going to be involved in the MPO, which we're deciding this year, we'll get an opportunity to see the operating agreement and then hopefully pass a resolution of support for that document.
Yes, Assemblyperson Yon, go ahead.
Through the mayor, quick question. So part of the 210,000 you had said was going to go to hire somebody to help in the planning department with setting it up, but is that going to be contract labor or is that going to be a future FTE?
Great question. Through the mayor to Assemblymember Yun. So we set it up so this will be a project employee. So it's a termed employee. So it will only be on staff for the term of this grant. Once the MPO is formed, it will have its own funding, will hire its own staff. It's possible whoever's hired, everyone will like that person. They'll want to stay on. They might transfer to the MPO, but it won't be a full-time borough employee. It's just for this grant term.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, further questions, comment? Okay, thank you. So now I will open the public hearing on ordinance 22-017 and resolution 22-015. Is there anyone that would like to testify? Caleb, do we have any? Okay, go ahead. We have someone online. Go ahead.
Yes, this is Deborah Berlinski. Did you mention 22-015?
A resolution.
Is that the ordinance we're addressing?
No, ordinance 22-017 and resolution 22-015.
Okay, I'm here to speak about the Historic Preservation Commission ordinance
Okay.
proposal, so
Okay. That,
one night, right now, right?
we are not on that, and that is not set for a public hearing, so you will need to testify under audience participation.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else online, Caleb, for that? No. One time coming back to the audience here. Anyone, the audience? No, see no one? Okay, I will close the public hearing. And Deputy Mayor.
I move to adopt ordinance 2217 and resolution 2215.
Okay, discussion. Okay, is there any objection? Okay, hearing no objection, the legislation passes. Okay, now I'm back on track, I believe, right? So we're jumping now to audience participation. You can address the assembly on any item that's on the agenda or anything you want to bring to their attention. You, of course, are limited to 3 minutes. And we do have a sign-up sheet, so I will take those people first. And then if somebody hasn't signed up, you'll have an opportunity also to speak. So Dan Mayfield?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Assembly. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the reconsideration that's on your agenda this evening. I do hope that you vote to reconsider the RIP list that Mr. Tu had put forward at the last meeting, and that you restore the old RIP list. You know, we live in a Republican form of government. And I think we do a really good job of that. We establish advisory committees to keep in contact with our elected officials and to let our needs known. And both the Community Council and the RSA Board, who are advisory, serve in advisory capacity, looked at the RIP list, which had been planned over many years. I want to say decades, actually. It was a plan for our community. And they approved the previous road improvements list. And I was at both meetings when Mr. Tu had indicated that we can do what we want, but he's going to do what he wants. And so, you know, that just says to me that he really doesn't care about the desires of the community. And I'm sorry to place it that way, but it's a fact. I mean, that's what he said. And not only did the Community Council and the RSA Board approve the original list, but you know, they also rejected his specific list. So the will of the community is clear, that they want to have the original list. And again, I have to emphasize the fact that this is something that's been planned in the community for years and years and years, predated the time that I was on the assembly. You know, we're throwing, with this new list, we're throwing away the community's long-term plan, and we're wasting about $180,000 in engineering costs with his list. And, you know, I just don't think that that's something the assembly wants to do. Obviously, the assemblyman has the power to change that list with your concurrence. However, I'm asking you not to give your concurrence. Thank you.
Mike Shields?
Madam Mayor, to the Assembly, I'm just going to, Mike Shields, I'm a RSA supervisor out in the Butte. I'm just going to reinforce, repeat almost what Dan Mayfield had to say, except that now it's becoming clear to the big board, i.e. 16 RSAs, that we put a lot of work into coming up with these lists. In my case, I'm looking at 20 years worth of building on that. And to have somebody come in, swap that list out for their own personal one with no justification given to this assembly at the time that was done. That's a slap in the face, and the reputation is beginning to suffer. I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. DJ McBride?
Good evening,
Good evening.
Madam Mayor, Assembly members. I'm DJ McBride, Chair of Caswell Lakes RSA 15. Once again, I'm presenting our board's concerns pertaining to 21-135 and its amendments. Previously, I pointed out how a time and materials contract would break our budget. In addition, I mentioned that canceling the Big Lakes contract shows very bad faith and would have a detrimental effect on our RSA. It's obvious that there's a great deal of opposition to this, from the residents to the RSA boards. I'd like to talk about this task force. There's two completely different subjects to be investigated: the time and materials contract and substandard roads. Apples and oranges. I would suggest that the best approach is to have two task forces, one for the contracts and one's for the substandard roads, as these are two completely different subjects. At this time, I'd like to talk about the contract task force. I think that the contract task force should have a representative from the big board, from the Transportation Advisory Board, RSA 21, Purchasing and Public Works. Now, the amendment reads in part, to create a task force to review and make a recommendation to the Assembly regarding a time and materials contract for RSAs, and should a recommendation come back favorable from the task force, to establish a pilot program and provide road service area services via a time and materials contract structure in Big Lake. According to the way this amendment is written, the decision of the task force becomes binding on the borough. That can't be right. The Assembly and the administration should act upon the task force recommendations as they see fit and not be bound by the task force findings. If this task force is structured and directed properly, then it could provide valuable information to the borough. Otherwise, it would simply be a waste of time and effort. Thank you.
Thank you. Terry? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Mayor,
Yeah.
Assembly
sir.
folks, my name is Terry Gorlick. The IM 22045 and Ordinance 22020 and Resolution 21135 and IM 21255 are quite complicated. I am in absolute concurrence with Mike Brown in regards to getting rid of basically 21135. So we really don't need to be speaking of IM 21255 or IM 22045 because those are just informational. But in removing 21135, which needs to be done for reasons I could spend far longer than 3 minutes in, what I've done in going into that is, if you look, what I've attached here is the 22020, which hopefully you'll clearly look, it intertwines still with 21135. So if we break it down and look at that, and we take the whereases and we number them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, which are really the direction to the assembly and to the task force of what's happening. Item number 5, whereas number 5 needs to be removed, whereas number 6 needs to be removed, and whereas number 7 needs to be removed because it intertwines again with the pilot program, intertwines with 21-135. And realistically, it's information. I think that when Rob Yunt brought that up, that what he wanted to look at was those specialized road situations, do a task force. I think that's critically important. And then if that task force determines at the end that time and materials can be done, then Assemblyman 2 or any of the other assembly folks can bring forth, start a resolution to do a time and materials in their area based on what they found out. Because the task force, which I can tell the group, I'm quite qualified to be able to be on that group, but that's not why I'm here today at all. It's that it's going to determine revisions in the current contract basis about saving money and things that don't need to be done. So it becomes more specific for the specific areas. Because if you see contracts, they're two-part contracts, a general provisions portion and then a detailed about specific RSAs. Well, I think when the task force looks at the fixed price contracts as part of this task force, they'll be able to identify a lot of cost savings in those areas, which I'm guessing Assemblyman 2 was really driving at in his original concept of what he was trying to do. So, and in the time and materials, they'll be able to clearly identify how time and materials will work in whether it be a pilot program. I mean, we're going to have this information that's going to come out here shortly through, I'm sure, Public Works about the 1 week of wind that happened and the time materials contracts that went out to all of the RSAs. And I've heard numbers upwards of $600,000 for one RSA and $500,000 for another RSA, some very wild numbers. So just in closure, and I apologize for the 3 minutes, if you take a look at this, you clearly see it works, it wins for everybody. We can get contractors involved in the task force, we can get borough employees, we can get the community involved. Everybody, it's a win-win. There's no negatives if we take out what Mike Brown has entertained to do is get rid of 2135 and what's associated with it simply in this, and then add some additional words in number 8, which would be the task force. So we're clear about it. The task force was brought forward and have focused and consider of time materials contracts, changes to the existing fixed price contract and specification. I think it's a win-win. But I think there's still some modifications that need to be done. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Irene Crowley.
Madam Mayor and Assembly members, thank you for this time that you're allowing me. I'm just going to make this simple. I'm not going to try to get into the technical part of the 21-135 or ordinance serial 22020. Here's the deal. This is going to be simple. RSA 21 had a RIP list. They worked hard on it. And then Representative 2 came along and tore it apart. Said, that's not going to work for me. And he put his own RIP list out there. That RIP list doesn't work. So then he gave this resolution 21-135, which is totally for him. It's not what the RSA group wanted. It was in great conflict with what we wanted. So I think really this task force needs to dig deep if they're going to actually do this. The task force really does need a representative from RSA 21. And I don't mean Representative 2 because he has his own agenda. I believe that someone from RSA 21, whether it's the president of the assembly for RSA 21, or it's the Big Lake community leadership. I think that the task force really needs to understand what's going on in Big Lake. I don't believe that if we have a time and materials contract, that the taxpayers in Big Lake can handle it. it's going to be expensive. Kenai ditched it because it was too expensive. They saved close to $1 million by going to just a fixed contract. So please get rid of 21-135. And if you do this task force, please, please, I'm begging you to add someone from our community that has the interest of our community involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric McCabe?
Madam Mayor, members of the Assembly, thank you again. I'm here today, as I was last month, to discuss the property assessments that have come out. I'm sure you have heard lots on the assessment issue now, I hope. This is going to be a big deal. You know, we have some assurances that the Assembly will be working with millage rates. That's not really reassuring. Especially when everybody is going to be looking at the potential of an increase in revenue of 25%, 30%, who knows? You guys probably do. You know, everybody is going to want a slice of that money. Everybody. And as soon, as you start deliberating on what the budget for next fiscal year will be, people will come out of the woodwork saying, hey, you have all of this extra money. Instead of reducing millage rates, why don't we just put a little bit of it to this? Just a little. You're going to hear that 1,000 times over. Please think of the people who live here. You all live here. Think of your neighbors. I personally know 3 different families who are on fixed incomes that if their property taxes increased 10%, it would be a serious financial burden. So please don't disregard, the rest of the members of our community. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else from the audience that didn't sign up but would like to testify? Yes, sir, come forth.
Good evening. I'm Andrew Traxler, Low Mayor.
Any-
Kind of an unusual situation for me to stand up here and do this. I didn't vote for Mr. Tu. I've been very critical of him, way meaner to him than anybody I've ever been that's been on the Assembly. My point of standing up here and speaking tonight is about this RIP list and it changing. So Moki won an election, okay, and he only won at 10, 15 votes. Okay, you're going to have people upset with things that he's changing with this RIP list. And Moki's responsibility is to represent that person that can't stand up here and speak like I can. That's what he's doing. I don't love the man or anything. I don't want you to think I'm doing this for that reason. So there has been a discrepancy in RSA funding in the 10 years that I've lived there. That there's seriously bad roads in that RSA. And I have gone to all the RSA meetings, and I believe that there was attempts to put some funding to some of these bad roads. I'm the loudest, most irritating person. Money has been put into the road that I live on. I see these other 6 roads that you see listed on his RIP list. Those people come to me. And they say, how'd you do it? And they aren't going to email you every morning at 5 o'clock in the morning like I do. It's just, they can't do it, So when you consider the change in the RIP list, I want you to consider that he is representing an unspoken voice. That is what the Assembly member's job is when he does override an advisory board. That's why he's overriding it. And so I think that's good information that you should have. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience that would like to participate in audience participation? Okay, Caleb, do we have some people? Okay, go ahead. So the person online, if you'll go ahead.
Hi, my name is Scott Wilson. I personally called each and every one of you assembly members on the a couple days prior to the last assembly meeting while I was on vacation in Hawaii, and personally told you how I felt about the time and material contract. And I basically asked you all the question of, is this something that you would do in your community? And I pretty much got the answer is no. So I'll ask you once again to take a look at what your answer was. Is this something that you would do in your particular district on that? And I also like to reiterate what Dan Mayfield said, as well as Mike Shields regarding the big board, that the RSA, you guys look to them in regards to what list they put together. I was at the January meeting when the road service for Big Lake, RSA 21, put together the list and voted upon it, as well as the Big Lake Community Council, and they voted upon it. However, two stood up in front of everybody and said, I'm not going to submit your list. I'm going to do it my way. What happened to listen to the will of the people? Thank you very much for taking time to listen to me.
Thank you. Caleb, do we have another person? Okay, go ahead online, please.
Hello, this is Cindy Bettini, and I'm happy to hear that Mr. Brown is recommending that 21-135, the Big Lake pilot program for TNM, be voted down, and I hope that you do that. I'm also calling about AM 20-111, the reconsideration of the 16 RSAs in the RIP list. Now, I realize that it isn't our assembly person, Mr. Tooth, who has requested this, but because it opens up the legislation, I'm, like several other have spoke tonight, asking that you support the citizens of Big Lake RSA 21's RIP list that was voted on at 2 or 3 public meetings. I think that RIP list was previously in the February 21 citizens and other correspondence, and I'm sure that the clerk can get that for you so you can compare it with the one that's in your packet today in AM 20-111. If you could make that comparison, you will see that Mr. Two's RIP list is really almost 100% difference. It has been traditional for, well, it was back in 2005, so more than a decade, that in Big Lake, and I believe in many of the other RSAs, that when the public comes before the RSA board, they ask about their roads and ask them to be put on the RIP list. And there are generally way more roads on the RIP list than can be funded. And as time goes on, your road percolates up to the top. And last year, roads percolated up to the top, and some of them had been considerable money, RSA money had been spent getting them ready for more improvements, and they were just ditched by Mr. Two's new RIP list. And now we see this again. I know there are some people in the audience that are talking about time and materials when they probably really ought to be talking about how disgruntled they are that their road project that's been on the list for 15 or more years is no longer on the list. And I think for the assembly, I'm just asking you to consider looking back at the policy that, and I think it was written at one time that this was a policy that you follow the list. Anyway, my time is up, and I just am asking that you reconsider the original list that was sent to you on February 1 by the RSA board. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Caleb, do we have another person? Okay, thank you. Go ahead online, please.
Yes, my name is Patricia Fisher. I am in agreement with Manager Brown that RS 21-135, the pilot program for time and materials, should be rejected. The opposition to this measure is strong. Big Lake residents are in opposition. There is a petition circulating with over 400 names stating opposition to this measure. The borough conducted a review and found that this method of contracting for road service is more costly. The Kenai Borough has moved away from time and materials because it's not easy to manage. And the Road Service Area Big Board is opposed to the measure. I urge the members of the Assembly to reject this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll come back to the public here. Anyone else like to testify? And we still have one person online? Okay, I'll come back to you then, okay? Okay, it doesn't look like anyone here. So Caleb, go ahead.
All right, this is Deborah Berlinski again. I'm sorry, this is the first time I've talked before the Assembly, so I don't know if it's time now for just open public comment on any of the ordinances or resolutions, or if I need to wait until mine is called specifically, so.
This is the perfect time, ma'am.
Okay, I wanted to speak to OR 22-115 on your agenda. It's an ordinance amending MSB 4.46, Historical Preservation Commission Ordinance. I've been a volunteer on the Historic Preservation Commission for 9 years. Our duty is to make recommendations to the Assembly regarding preserving history in the borough. Today, these are my personal remarks, though I'm not representing the commission as a whole. I am in support of you passing Ordinance 22015. It modifies our duties a little bit. And one thing it does is allows us to update the historic preservation plan that is severely out of date. We've been working on this. There was a grant that was awarded to us, and it's in progress. My deal, though, is I feel like after we get the plan done, that it's going to need to be applied to a lot of borough departments to preserve history in the borough. And I believe the highest risk history in the borough are archaeological deposits, which are all over the borough. Some of them are 10,000 years old, and we don't know where they are all located. We can have a pretty good idea, but we don't know where they're all located. And so I just want to let you know that I believe passing this ordinance is a beginning. It's not an end. There'll need to be additional ordinance passed in the future to apply this plan to different departments in the borough, the planning department. I think people have, and other boroughs in Alaska, they have procedures for looking at property to determine, having an archaeologist go there and see if there's anything of importance on the land. And I think it's really a misnomer to say that an archaeological examination of your land is going to hinder development in the borough. In fact, it enhances development. It requires only a brief inspection. Any artifacts found on land can be kept by the landowner. And so I recommend passing it. I have submitted also written statements. I believe you're going to vote on this at your March 1st meeting, but I urge you to look at my written statements as well. In the past, we did have a cultural resources department, which preserved some of these archaeological deposits we have. That was eliminated due to budget concerns, but I think it'd be a good idea to reinstate it. I think it did save the borough money instead of costing the borough money. But my main deal is we aren't done. It's going to require future work with the planning department, who, by the way, are great right now. They're wonderful. And so thank you for hearing me.
So, ma'am, let me call to your attention that not on March 1st, this ordinance will be in the public hearing. So if you wish to testify that night, you would testify under that specific ordinance. You wouldn't have to testify under audience participation. And yes, we did get your email.
Okay, thank you. I'll do that. I'm learning the procedure, so
yeah,
I'll attend the March 1st meeting as well. Thank you.
You're welcome. Caleb, do we have anybody else? No. Okay. Anybody here in the public that didn't testify that would like to on any item? Okay, so with that, I will close audience participation, and we are now at the consent agenda. And we have pulled some items, but does the assembly have anything else to pull? Okay, so Madam Clerk, would you read the consent agenda as it exists now, I guess, with
Resolution 22018, a resolution amending the scope of work and budget for the two timber-related projects and extending the completion date to June 30th, 2023. Resolution 22022, a resolution authorizing the manager to sign and submit grant applications to the Alaska State Department of Fish and Game, Division of Wildlife Conservation for hunter access improvements to the Jim Creek Campground Trailhead and the Moose Range Parking Lot Trailhead at Went Road. AM 22005, awarded bid number 22032B to CCI Industrial Services in the contract amount of $147,982 to repair the water storage tank at Sutton Station 11. And AM 22012, approval of contract extension of bid 22029B with New Horizons Telecom Incorporated for a final completion date of December 23rd, 2022 for the generator install project at Station 12-2.
Okay, Deputy Mayor, would you like to move the consent agenda, please?
I move to approve the consent agenda as read into the record by the clerk.
Okay, is there any objection? Okay, hearing none, then the consent agenda is approved. And Madam Clerk, if you will read to us the next item we need to bring up.
It's Resolution 22019, a resolution providing a one-time waiver of landfill fees for up to 3 dumps and payment for dumpster placement, hauling and disposal costs for the Willowa subdivision, pulled by Assemblymember Sumner.
Okay, did you want to address your? Okay, you move it and then I think you have an amendment, sir.
I move to adopt Resolution 2219.
Okay, you want to go ahead and address your amendment, please?
I actually don't have an amendment for this one. I thought that
Oh,
we
Councilman,
discussed that somebody else had
Assemblyperson
one.
Yuan, do you have an amendment for your legislation?
No, I'm not sure why it was pulled. I have the legislation as was drafted originally, but
There's a blank line on that page. And
Oh.
so,
I sure do. Yes. Yes, I apologize.
and so unless you want it to go on for eternity.
No, ma'am. So yes, I would like to add into the blank line, June 30th, 2022.
Okay. Okay, so thank you. Yes, Assemblyperson McKee?
Yeah, I just had a question. I think it's a really good idea. I was wondering, once you get this in place, does the borough have any enforcement powers? How do you say, okay, get that truck off your lot or we're gonna do what? I think we need this, but how do you enforce it?
Through the mayor.
Okay, before you start, please, let's keep the discussion at this time to the amendment, which is the date. And
Oh,
then
okay.
if that passes, then we'll go into the main motion and I'll recognize you for your question,
Thank you.
okay? All right, so any discussion on the amendment, and it was June 30th, 2022,
Yes, ma'am.
right? Okay. Is the objection to the amendment? Okay, now I'll recognize you for your question, ma'am.
Thank you. As I said, I think it's an excellent idea, much needed. How does the borough enforce that? So you tell these folks you got 3 dump, waive the fees for 3 dump fees. And what if they don't do it anyway? How do you get teeth in this thing?
Okay,
So
you want to discuss?
through the mayor to Ms. McKee, we don't have any additional enforcement powers other than what we already have in terms of code enforcement and our ability to cite for junk and trash. What this represents is an opportunity where you may have issues that have accumulated over time, and there is community support for cleaning it up. The benefit of partnering with community support to clean it up is that you're hoping that those folks will help to not allow this situation to occur again. But the reality is it could. I mean, that's always going to be the case. But we have our normal powers that we execute on a daily basis. And there's no absolute guarantees.
So in the final analysis, I was thinking of this, maybe this would kind of support it. Does the borough go to court to get this thrown off there? Do the neighbors get to go to court? And if they did, would this help support their case to get this out of there, make this guy, man or woman, do this thing? Get it out of
Yeah.
there?
So through the mayor to Ms. McKee, I don't think it helps our case. I mean, we obviously can take these actions to an injunction, but in this situation, what you have, and in other situations, I think Mr. Hale could speak to what occurred in the Butte. Sometimes you'll get folks from the community that come in and they just need some help getting a situation cleaned up. And I think that's what this represents. It's been done in the past. This is a second occurrence, and we've also done it in other places across the borough.
Okay, thank you.
Assemblyperson Hale, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a great thing. We did this out in Butte to clean up the old compound in the gravel pit. We're not completely, weren't able to completely clean up that property with the grant that the borough gave us, but we made a lot of headway on it. And then the community chipped in, and somebody brought a gate post, and we were able to put up a gate in front of the particular gravel pit that was being used as a dumping ground. And from the road, it looks amazing now. There's still some stuff farther back in the woods and stuff, but this kind of thing really helps a community-driven cleanup effort, and I think it's fantastic. I support Mr. Yunt in this 100%.
Okay. Assemblyperson Yunt.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Tim. I was just going to say, I was actually born and raised in this subdivision, and I remember them doing something like this. It must have been the borough, I assume, but when I was probably 7, 8 years old or something. There's maybe been some sense, I'm not sure, but it had a huge positive impact on Willowa subdivision. I've talked to Mr. Fernandez and the members of the community in there, and it's gonna be a team effort. I'm looking forward to it. I'll be there. I'm taking my kids. We're gonna work our butt off. It'll be a team effort, and I appreciate you guys' support.
Further discussion? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
I just wanted to say as well, just to, when a community wants to step up and do the work and we just provide an ability for them to do that, I support that. I mean, kind of speaking to what you were saying about how do we stop this from being repetitive? I know we've had this before in Willowa and we've allowed them to clean up, but as opposed to like one individual piece of property where that individual keeps doing it, this is community trying to get together to do it. And the junk and trash deal in the borough, people put things out there that it's just really hard to police and to stop people from doing it again. But I appreciate Assemblymember Yunt bring this forward and the community getting together to clean it up and try to make it better over there. So.
Further discussion? Yes. Assemblyperson
Thank you, Madam
Hale.
Mayor. I'll just say it's kind of like playing whack-a-mole, so be prepared, Mr. Yunt, to chase these guys all over your district because they're gonna find another place to dump. It's one thing that we've been dealing with over in Butte, and you just kind of chase them around and kick them out of each place as you find them.
Further discussion? Is there any objection to Resolution 22-019 as amended? Okay, if not, then that becomes legislation. Madam Clerk, the next item.
Resolution 2220, a resolution directing administration to explore the formation of a regional port authority and report to the Assembly, and it was pulled by Assemblymember Sumner.
Okay, Deputy Mayor.
I move to adopt Resolution 2220, and I move to amend Resolution 2220 as follows by amending the title to read, a resolution of the Matanuska-Susitna Borough Assembly directing administration to explore the formation of a regional port authority and/or creating a economic development zone at Port McKenzie and reporting to the Assembly. By inserting the whereas clauses, whereas an economic development zone for Port McKenzie could also be beneficial to taxpayers, consumers, and all of Alaska, and whereas an economic development zone for Port McKenzie would include state and local tax incentives to encourage private investment, and whereas forming an economic development zone might require changes to state law or borough code, and whereas the Matanuska-Susitna Borough Assembly believes adequate time and resources should be devoted to exploring the viability and any necessary changes to state law or borough code to create an economic development zone at Port McKenzie. By adding the following resolution, be it further resolved, the Matanuska-Susitna Borough Assembly directs administration to direct the appropriate time and resources to exploring the formation of an economic development zone for Port McKenzie, and also pursue any changes to state law or borough code necessary to form a zone. And I guess I'd just speak to this briefly. I was initially hopeful that we could create a regional port authority with Anchorage. I would note that the governor had in his budget $175 million for such a regional port authority. It's looking like that may be less than likely to happen. So this is just an alternate route that we could go down. I really would just like to see us go any route that gets activity down there, I think is going to be beneficial. So.
Okay. Discussion on the amendment. Yes, Assemblyperson.
Could we get the staff to weigh in on this? Maybe the port director or the public works or the manager or somebody?
Sure.
So
Go
through the mayor to Mr. Hale, I guess that's just a general question. We talked about this at the port special meeting. And I think what Mr. Sumner intended to do was, ensure that we chased out this idea of a regional port authority. The mayor and I met with the Mayor Bronson and the governor. We talked a little bit more about this idea of a regional port authority. I think it is something we will continue to discuss, but I think there will be, to be frank, I think there will be some reservations around relinquishing any control of a port to an independent third party. So what I think this amendment does is it also opens up, as Mr. Sumner stated, the opportunity to look at ways that we might create a zone to incentivize private investment. In a nutshell, that basically means look at the things that are within your control and consider tax breaks and other things that might incentivize private investment to come in and develop things at Port McKenzie or in the uplands that we have available within the port district. And I think in a nutshell, I would say it this way. We're looking to exhaust all possibilities and figure out what that should look like in the future. We're not terribly interested, because I don't think the assembly is terribly interested in continuing to do business as we have over the past several years.
Okay, further discussions? This is on the amendment to expand the title and the scope of work. Discussion? Okay, is there any objection to the amendment? Okay, hearing no objection, then the amendment has passed. Now you have before you the RS 22-020 as amended. Discussion on the main motion. Is there any objection to the main motion? Seeing none, then it becomes legislation. Okay, Madam Clerk, we have some more?
Resolution 22023, a resolution allocating an additional $1,119,673 in American Rescue Plan funding for the purchase of heavy equipment for the Solid Waste Division and amending the scope of work. This was pulled by Assembly Member 2.
Okay, Assembly Member 2. Let's see, first we need a motion to adopt, right? So do you want to make a motion to adopt? Okay, go ahead, sir.
I make a motion to adopt RS 22-023
Okay,
and RS 22-023.
okay. Alrighty, and now do you want to speak to your motion?
Sure. So I would say that I am 100% in support of recycling tires at the landfill. I've been speaking out about that for probably, 20 years. But I think that I don't believe that the borough should be in the equipment business. So what I'd like to see is, instead of us buying equipment and having to hire specialized people to work on the equipment, is to hire contractors to do this job, put out a bid and so forth. And if we do need to do a big improvement that costs a lot of money at the landfill that would help everybody, I would ask that we put in a tipping floor. So I don't know, I would say probably 3 weeks out of a year, if you put all the days together, the garbage people can't dump their trucks. And that's because the wind blows. So they just shut them down. So what happens is the trucks either go into Anchorage to dump their garbage, or they hold it tight and then hope the next day that they can go to the landfill and dump it, because their routes are Monday through Friday. So that's what I would say. I'd say I would like the Mat-Su Borough not to be in the equipment business. That's what I would say. So I'd like to vote these down.
Okay, so you're recommending that RS 22-023 and AM 22004, is that right?
And 3.
I'm sorry, what?
We're only on the resolution right now. We have the
Okay.
AMs coming up.
Okay, so on resolution 22-023, you're recommending a no vote, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, further discussion? Yes, Assemblyperson York, go ahead.
Yeah, there's a lot of points that Moki brings up that I think are very valid. I just got a couple of quick questions. I know this is grant money. Can we, and I need some direction maybe from the attorney here, but can we use the grant money to look into, I've never heard of a tipping floor, but Moki explained it to me. It sounds like a great idea, especially as windy as it gets in the valley. There is quite a few days a year that we can't use the central landfill there. So could we use the grant money to build a tipping floor?
So the grant money these are ARP funds, American Rescue Plan funds. And the guidance that was put out by Treasury on allowable use of the funds says you can use them to construct any facilities or improvements or buy capital equipment that is allowed by a clean water or a drinking water revolving loan fund. And that's what typically funds the improvements at the landfill. So constructing, I'm not sure what a tipping floor is exactly. I apologize.
It
I push
sounds
paper for a
like
living.
it sounds like a big facility. I've seen one down the peninsula, but they can, if it's windy, they can pull in and dump there. Or maybe we should.
Yeah, perhaps Director Dolan can speak to that. In terms of building a facility or building an improvement or acquiring a capital project, you can do that with this money, not operations though. So hiring somebody to run it or come in with other equipment and do it via contract, that would not qualify for a clean water loan, therefore, because it's operational in nature.
I have one more question then,
Sure,
if that's
follow
okay, a
up.
follow-up. So it sounds like building the structure would be legal. And so I have a question then for Mr. Dolan. Have we ever looked at building a tipping floor? Have we looked into that? Is that something you think the community could really benefit from?
Your mic.
Terry, you'll have to turn it on. We had too many mics on it. We had 3 people up here plus that one.
Terry Dolan, Director of Public Works. Through the mayor to Mr. Yount. A tipping floor is a component of most large modern landfills in the lower 48. They're not very common here in Alaska for a couple of reasons. One is the purpose of a tipping floor isn't to store waste until it's not windy. The purpose of it is to allow you to segregate recyclable materials from items that have to go into the lined MSW cell and segregate items that can go into the C&D cell as well, because it's much less expensive to place things in the C&D cell. Could we use a tipping floor? We probably could. We don't really have the volume to justify it, and the opportunities to recycle materials here in Alaska is well below those opportunities in the lower 48. We talked about glass at the strategic plan meeting. There just really aren't any valuable uses of that kind of material here. It's difficult with plastics even to make that pay. Cardboard you can actually do pretty well on here in Alaska, but that's really about it for local uses without any kinds of manufacturing facilities that need the feedstock that you would segregate on a tipping floor. You don't really have a need for a segregating facility like that. Could we build one? We would. We could. We would have to man up to operate it, and we would have to get additional equipment. Normally, what you see inside a tipping floor is a bunch of laborers and some heavy equipment that we don't currently own, that's used to move the waste around and to sort it out. So it is a possibility.
Okay, so I appreciate that. I know a lot. The next question would be kind of staying in line with, and I could see Mr. Two's reasoning for not owning a bunch of equipment, possibly, but after hearing from the attorney and facilities, is there any structures or facilities that you think we do need down there right now, or that would be something that would support how we do things up here that maybe we could use the money better for?
Through the mayor to Mr. Yunt. What I would recommend is that you take a look at the staff analysis that was included in the AMs, and specifically this one's, it's in both of them, but this is in 22 dash, looks like 073. It's hard to read the writing, Brenda. You asked me one of the last times that we talked about, I think it was on the pup trailer, like what's the return on investment? This graph right here shows you the return on investment of these items. It makes money for the borough in the first year. It reduces the cost of operating the landfill in a lot of different ways. We talked about on-site disposal of leachate at very, very low cost. We talked about producing bedding material for the leachate distribution pipes and for the gas collection system that we're required to have by the state of Alaska and by EPA. We talked about excavating our own cells. There's 2.7 million reasons here to do this as proposed. And the reason that we proposed ARP money and the manager supported us on that is those funds will help reduce the cost of operating the landfill, and every borough resident will benefit from that. We could have used it on Talkeetna Sewer and Water. The money could be used that way for sewer and water systems, but we didn't recommend to you to use it in Talkeetna because it's 200 accounts, 200 families that would benefit, or businesses that would benefit from that. When you do this at the landfill, you're keeping rates low for every borough resident.
Okay, so then one more question, I'm sorry, but keep giving me more good information, which leads to new questions. So say we move forward and we use the grant money to buy the equipment. Have we decided how we would operate that? Do we have the operators on staff right now? Would we be looking for full-time employees to do that, full-time borough employees, or would we put out a request for proposal from possibly, say, a local construction company who would supply the labor? Have we thought that far ahead yet, or have we?
Through the mayor. So initially, we don't plan on hiring any additional employees, but the initial usages will be limited to the excavation for the piping that I was talking about, and shredding the tires. As you expand the uses, obviously an excavator like this with the equipment that it comes with has a lot of different great opportunities, things you can do with it. And the more you can keep a piece of equipment like this working, the less you pay in a contractor, including that contractor's general and administrative costs and their profits. The more you can keep it working, the less of that you have to pay. I think ultimately, if you provide this, you'll see us using it to, over time, excavate new cells. We had a savings of around $4 or $5 million per landfill cell. So I think there's great opportunity. If we extend the use of this into excavating the landfill cells, I will come back to you for additional manpower. But just for the initial purpose of shredding the tires, of laying the pipe, and shredding the brush is the other big expense that we have right now. The Assembly has directed us to take brush at no cost to reduce fire hazards. It's costing us around $80,000 to $100,000 a year. We think this next year over $100,000 to dispose of that. This equipment enables you to do that without paying a contractor $100,000 a year. That's how this pays for itself so quickly and saves us money in the first year.
And so we do have trained operators on staff that can run this stuff. then.
We do right now, that's correct. There's additional training that's required, typically heavy equipment training that we do. I don't know if you're familiar with the OSHA requirements for forklift training, but the very specific records. Those aren't typically required for heavy equipment operation, but that's the type of training we do and the type of records we keep so that we ensure our employees can operate safely in the environment that we expect them to work in with the equipment that we expect them to operate.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, through the mayor to Director Dolan, in the AM, it describes it as a first of its kind tire reuse and recycling program. Has nobody else done this before, or?
I think, and I don't have that line in front of me, but I think it says first of its kind in the valley.
Yeah.
I know I read that in there somewhere, but it is the first of its kind here in the valley. We do not have any recycling opportunities for tires. I'm not sure anyone else in Alaska does, but it'll definitely give us an opportunity to quit burying those in the C&D cell. They're almost impossible to compact. They take up an enormous amount of room. And if we shred them, they're good material for passing both the liquids in a leachate distribution system and passing the gases involved in the gas collection system.
And how finely will this shred
I think,
tires?
if I'm not mistaken, this particular shredder is in the 2-inch area.
So could you also then use it for like trails and that sort of thing, or does it need to be more finely shredded for that?
For trails, you said?
Yeah.
So I believe that requires a different type of shredder. You would probably take that 2-inch material and run it through a different device. But I'm not aware of any demand for that material. I would love to go out and pave some of our trails here in the borough with that material, but I don't think it's being done here right now. It would be expensive to get started, but it would produce ADA compliant trails that are both enjoyable to walk on and accessible by people in wheelchairs, for example.
One more thing. How many tires a year do we take at the landfill?
So the number is in here. I just read it. I want to say it was 40,000 or 20,000 cubic yards, 80,000 tires. Is that the number? There it is. Yep. 80,000 tires and 20,000 cubic yards worth. So that's a direct savings. Space is money at the landfill. So when you stop burying that 20,000 cubic yards of tires, you create 20,000 cubic yards of airspace that other material can go into, material that produces revenue as it comes through the gate.
Assembly person hours?
Thank you. I'm not sure I really have a question, but this just sounds like a real win for us. Said the cost of digging out a new cell is so expensive. And if we've got a material, I mean, throwing a big tire in there versus shredding it and using it, for uses on site seems like a really good deal. The tipping floor sounds like a good idea too. I don't think these are mutually exclusive. It sounds like we can't use the ARP funding for contract work on this. So, and then we could leverage that excavator for other work there. And, maybe that goes out to contract work at some point, a contractor operated, maybe the borough does. It just seems like a good deal to stop throwing the tires in whole and put them to good use. Maybe just a clarification that I didn't quite catch that this is for a clean water bucket of funding, but could a tipping floor? I heard Rob say that we could use ARP funding for that. So we could come back and do another bucket of funding for that? Because I could see that being useful on windy days, and then also just we had this whole issue of reusable stuff coming into that C&D, good stuff that if we could separate it. So just clarification on that bucket of funding. Does it look like we could also come back and do a tipping floor if we wanted to do that and get it paid for out of the ARP funds?
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly talk with
Mr.
Terry's
Turner?
folks as engineers, but typically speaking, the loans that the Borough Assembly approves that we've taken through the enterprise fund that are secured by the tipping fees from the state of Alaska are clean water loans, basically. And what the federal law on the ARP funds, remember, ARP fund was not only COVID relief, but it branched out into clean water, sewer and water infrastructure, and internet service infrastructure as well, right? So when it comes to that water sewer infrastructure, what Congress did and what the Treasury confirmed through their guidance was they basically said, look, if whatever project you're looking to do qualifies for a loan under either the clean water program or the drinking water program, so one is for drinking water, one is for wastewater disposal. If it qualifies under either program, then you can just spend ARP money on it. You don't have to take a loan. And so typically, all of the landfill structures that have dealt with processing waste, dealing with waste, because it's all about protecting the watershed and the environment, because it's a landfill, have qualified for those. I don't see any reason sitting right here, right now, why it wouldn't. I would want to explore it a little bit better with, Mr. Dolan and his crew, but.
I agree. I think it's very likely that we would be able to obtain a clean water fund loan for a tipping floor, just like any other facility we would install at the landfill to reduce the amount of material that's going into the landfill. We would all have to ultimately apply and ask for that, but I think it's a reasonable conclusion to come to, that it would be supportable with this money.
Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it just seems like this is a good deal to move forward with, and then we can come back and take a look at the tipping floor.
Okay, Assemblyperson Hale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through the mayor to Director Dolan. So, refresh my memory here, the $1 million is for this CAT 323 excavator and this waste shredder. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay. I was, the only thing that I was surprised by was that you were buying such a small excavator. So.
It's
Okay,
just
further
for lifting
discussion.
tires and brush and stuff.
Further discussion. Okay, the motion before you, I'm sorry. Assemblyperson 2, go ahead.
So I'd like to ask one more thing, if we do move forward, is that we actually go out for bid on these items. I looked at one of your pieces of paper here and it said for the excavator is 337,000. Another one of your pieces of paper said 306,000. So I went ahead and called and got an estimate for 270,000. So that's $67,000 less, which might not sound like a lot. I guess we're talking about $1 million, but I didn't look for the bigger piece. So if you are going to move forward with this, I would suggest that you actually get some bids, and it not only be a CAT piece of equipment. There's Hitachi and Volvo and everything else out there. But here's the document.
Okay.
Thank you.
Further discussion. Okay, is there any objection to passing RS 22-023? Okay, so Madam Clerk, you'll take the roll then for people to vote.
I can get everybody to vote, please. Assemblymember McKee. Thank you. Assemblymember Bernier.
Yes.
It passed with Assemblymember 2 opposed.
Okay. And Madam Clerk, we have another item.
We do, and it is AM 22003, awarded bid number 22067C to NC Machinery in the contract amount of $306,725 to purchase a CAT 323 excavator. It was pulled by Assemblymember 2.
Okay, Assembly Member 2, would you like to move the AM so we can discuss?
I move the AM 22003.
Okay, discussion. Assemblyperson, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sure.
Go
I
ahead.
got a bid right here for 270,000 for the same machine. And I think if they're going to put it out for bid, it should go to Volvo, Hitachi, and everything else if we're going to spend money.
Okay, Assemblyperson Hale.
Yeah, I just, through the mayor, I'd like to ask the director what the bid process was like.
So,
Okay. Go ahead,
Terry
sir.
Dolan, Director of Public Works. Unfortunately, Mr. Kraft had to leave early tonight, and I would normally turn to him to talk about procurement methods, but what I can tell you is the procurement method was through a company called Sourcewell, which is a company that pre-competes all kinds of equipment around the nation and provides the lowest prices that they can obtain to municipalities around the United States. I haven't seen exactly what Assembly Member 2 went and got a quote for, so I can't really talk to that. I do know this comes with extra equipment, including different buckets, for example, for different types of tasks. There's an excavating bucket there, heavy duty one, and a clean out bucket that has a thumb that's for picking up brush and feeding the grinder or picking up tires. So there is some extra equipment on this particular device that may account for the difference in price, but I don't know. I do know there isn't, at least in our experience, a cheaper way to procure equipment, including trucks, than going through these nationwide procurement agencies that pre-compete all of this stuff. State of Alaska does the same way. We think it's the most prudent way to procure these things.
Okay. Further discussion? Yes, Assemblyperson Yount, go ahead.
I just want to clarify, I think, and it's a valid concern. I think one of Mr. 2's concerns is that we allocated 1.119673, and when you add these two numbers up, it's only $1,016,000. So we're talking a little over $100,000 difference here. I like to hear that. It means we're actually spending less than we allocated by 100,000 or so, but the math doesn't add up in what we would actually spend on these two compared to what we allocated. So I just wanted to clarify, I do think that was one of his concerns. We might have an answer.
Through the mayor to Assemblymember Yount, when we originally wrote this allocation for the spending plan, we had a general idea where the bids would come in, and with the pricing the way it has been with supply chain issues, we added a little extra in case the bids came in more than what happened.
Thank you. And I am glad to hear that there's a little bit over 100,000 there that we would be saving. What would happen to those funds? Would that stay in this account?
What would happen is we would amend the spending plan later when we have additional items to bring forward to you. So that money would be moved back into the remainder of what we have left on the ARP funding.
Thank you.
Through the mayor to Director Dolan or possibly the attorney, I had thought that the American Rescue Plan contained Buy American provisions, so I'm not, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know that we can actually purchase a Volvo or a Hitachi excavator with that money. Is that incorrect, or is that?
I don't know. I have to research that to find out that answer.
And I don't know precisely whether there's language in there, but I can tell you that most of the federal money that we receive comes with Buy American provisions that would prohibit us from using, steel from Korea or whatever. We ran into this on loan money, a Clean Water Fund loan money that we received for the landfill on a fencing project. Finance director, I'm sure remembers this, that it turned out our contract didn't specify the source for some of the fencing material, and we ended up not being able to use Clean Water Fund loan money because it came from out of the United States. So we had to then go find other funds to pay for it. So I think your instinct on this is right on. I think it's likely that those provisions are in there, but I have not specifically read those provisions myself.
I'm not exactly sure, but they're all metric. Whether it be Hitachi, Volvo, Caterpillar, it's all metric. So giddy up.
So if we could get the same thing for $67,000 less or whatever it is, why would we not do that?
Well, the only thing I would say is I haven't seen the equipment that Assemblyman 2 spec'd. And so I don't know what attachments and whatnot are included on there. It certainly could be that the attachments are not the same. Could be that the horsepower is not the same. But this is this equipment that we spec'd out was specifically spec'd for recycling operation and to do the tasks that I described to you that we would use this for. So I think what is likely is that we're comparing apples to oranges in terms of the precise piece of equipment and attachments.
So could you guys look at this thing and see if it has what you need?
I certainly could, if Assemblymember 2 wanted to share his price quote with us, we could go take a look at it and see what's not on that's on ours, or
Yeah.
what the difference is.
Thank you.
Further discussion by the Assembly, yes. Assemblyperson Howard?
Just whether we could just move this forward with the award to bid, that you've looked at Sourcewell, and then if Mr. Two is willing to share that, can you just take a look at that? And if it's a better deal, you can go forward with that. But we could go ahead and approve this.
I think we could do that. I mean, I'm happy to go research it and come back to the Assembly before we execute those funds. So if it turns out Sourcewell was not the cheapest source of this, we could go somewhere else with those funds.
That's what I'd suggest. We just approve this, and then if you take a look at that and it's the same deal and it's cheaper, come back to us and let's do that.
Deputy Mayor?
Well, I think if we award the bid, then we're going to award the bid and spend the money. So if your intention is to come back and look at it, I would think that we'd need to postpone it to the next meeting, I suppose.
Mr. Attorney, do you have a comment regarding that? This AM does seem to award the bid, and
So
if it would pass.
The code says that the manager or the purchasing officer may not execute a contract over $100,000 unless the Assembly has authorized it. Obviously, if the Assembly's intent in voting tonight wants to do what Assemblymember Nowers wants to do, that you certainly can. This isn't a situation where it was competitively bid, so you might have another bidder out there who would say, well, I made these bid prep costs and now you're changing the rules at the end. This appears to be a quote that was obtained by the purchasing officer through one of the joint purchasing contracts, which we're in several of them. So you could go either way with it, whichever one you want to do.
Okay. Assemblyperson Hale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to point out that this is the same outfit. This is NC Machinery, is the same outfit as we're awarding the bid to. So maybe Mr. Dolan could just take this down there and be like, hey, how come we're paying $67,000 more on this particular piece of equipment?
The only caution I would offer is we're seeing week-to-week increases in the prices of equipment and materials. And I think it's reasonable to expect if we don't award this and come back in a few weeks and attempt to award it again, that we won't have a valid price anymore. So that's just a risk I would point out.
Okay, Assemblyperson Yon.
I know I get stuck on numbers sometimes, but I just want to clarify, it's not a $67,000 difference, 68. It's about 36, which is still a ton of money, but I think it's 67, 68 from what we had allocated. But then the quote that came back to the borough was better than what we'd allocated. So and by all means, it's 36 grand. It's a lot of money, but it's not quite 67. So I wanted to clarify that because it's making my head hurt.
Okay. Further discussion on the motion to approve AM 22-003. Assemblyperson 2, go ahead.
I think if we're going to buy stuff, we should put it out to competitive bidding. And I shouldn't be able to come up with smaller numbers on the same piece. If so, I'd like to sell it to you and I'll go pick it up.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, sir.
I couldn't resist through the mayor and I really say this more for the public. We do not know that we're comparing apples to apples here. So I don't want there to be this perception that the borough's out there looking for ways to spend more money and that all we had to do was pick up a phone and get a cheaper price. There's a process in place and I'm happy at any assembly member's direction to go work on that and go revisit that, or if there's questions about it, but we don't know that because we didn't have this information until now. I'll leave it at that.
I was gonna say that was just my point. Like, let's just approve this, be done with it, and then get that bid to Mr. Dolan. And if it's the same, execute on the cheaper bid, or like Mr. Hale said, go in and say, this is the same deal, why is it cheaper, and do that, but let's not hold this, let's just do that. And
Mic on. Sorry. Further discussion by the assembly? Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, sir.
It's Ron.
Uh-huh.
I feel that we should take and move it to the next meeting.
Okay, so is that?
I think that'd give them a chance to check on prices, and who knows, after all this, somebody else may want to sell an excavator a little bit cheaper.
Okay.
That's American made.
I am going to assume that you are making the motion to postpone AM 22-003 until our next meeting, which will be March 1st. Is that correct, sir?
I am.
Okay.
I am.
All right, thank you. So discussion on the motion to postpone. Yes, Assemblyperson Hale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On the motion to postpone, I don't think that it's necessary, particularly since this bid that the assembly member was able to get is from the exact same company that we're awarding the bid to. So I don't think it's necessary for us to postpone this. I think we just go ahead and move ahead, and Mr. Dolan can look at this piece of equipment over here and see if it's the same piece of equipment. And if it is, then he can ask the price was so much higher, and they can figure it out from there.
Okay, Assemblyperson Yon.
I'm in agreement. I think if we postpone, we run the risk of possibly losing the quote. I say we move forward with it and ask Mr. Dolan to report back to us in 2 weeks and let us know if there was a difference between the $270,000 piece of equipment and $306,000 piece. What was the difference? And we'll call it good. Then we know.
Okay. Further discussion? Oh, yes, Assemblyperson McKee? Did you have, no? Okay, sorry.
No, but I guess I would like
But
to
now
ask.
you
just
think
like-
about it, huh?
No. So if we move ahead with it, it's not saying we're taking the high bid that we've got right here. It just says we're gonna just go and ask them about it, right? Like, what are you doing, folks, right?
That's my understanding. Go ahead, sir.
Through the mayor to the assembly and to Ms. McKee, we will go back and look at the numbers. I think what Mr. Yuntz suggested is reasonable. We can go back, look at it, talk to NC Machinery, find out why there's a difference, even make sure that we have the right accessories and everything spec'd out
Yep.
correctly. And then I think you can trust us to make the decision that we'll take the lowest cost.
Yep.
And then we can report back to the assembly. And if you want that done formally, we can do that via an IEM. So it's in the record.
Okay. Ready? Further discussion on the motion to postpone? Okay, if you go ahead.
We've heard objections, so we'll go ahead.
Right, yeah. So if you'll go ahead and vote, and then
No, we're not postponing.
clerk will take the toll.
Assemblymember Bernier,
Yes.
it failed with Assemblymember Bernier in support. We're back to the main motion.
Jack, thank you. I'm so used to the thing being on all the time. Thank you, Madam Clerk. The motion before you is to approve AM 22-003. Further discussion on that main motion. Okay, is there any objection to the main motion? We do have objection, so the clerk will take the roll.
Assemblymember Bernier,
No.
it passed with Assemblymember Bernier, Sumner, and 2 opposed.
Okay. You ready, Madam Clerk?
Let me get this
Oh,
vote down
sure.
really
Mhm.
quickly. AM 22004 awarded bid number 22066C to BCI Equipment LLC in the contract amount of $711,159.50 to purchase a waste shredder for use at the central landfill, and it was pulled by Assembly Member 2.
Okay, Assembly Member 2, would you like to move and then discuss?
I'd like to move AM 22-003. And as
No,
I
no,
s-
4, sir.
Oh, 4, I'm sorry.
Mhm.
And I'd just like to say the same thing as I would like the borough not to be in the equipment business. And I would like to have a contractor come in and do this. I think the repairs and the special work, special mechanic it takes to work on it, and also the techniques to operate this piece of equipment would be better served by for the public by having a contractor do that job.
Okay, further discussion on the motion to approve AM 22-004. Yes, Assemblyperson Yant, go ahead, sir.
We talked a lot about this at the strategic planning session where we were gonna have this grant money available to us and limited ways to spend it. And I 100% agree with Moki. It's typically like road maintenance, right? I don't think the Matsu Borough should be in the road maintenance business, right? Our roads are maintained substantially better out here than some other communities where it's all done in-house. With that being said, it's a grant that's buying the funds. So I just want to ask again to the manager, would it be possible for us to, if we own the equipment because we got the money given to us, could we go out to bid for specialized operators when in need? So could we go out to bid for specialized operators so that private industry can operate the equipment for us?
Assemblyperson Benner, would you mute your phone, please? Thank you. Okay. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
Mike,
we
did
couldn't
you get
hear
that,
what you were
or-
saying, so
Yeah.
go ahead, sir.
So through the mayor to Mr. Yunt, and when we talked about this at strategic planning, we talked about using federal funding to offset the cost of the capital. If we don't do that and we just go out and hire and bid out a contract or for a contractor to both provide and operate the equipment, their expense to acquire that capital is going to be included in the cost of the contract and is going to be passed off to the enterprise fund, which ultimately makes it back into the fees that every resident pays. What this was intended to do was offset the capital and pass it off to federal dollars that are coming to the Matsu Borough regardless. And then evaluate options for how we might do that. As Mr. Dolan mentioned, initially, it's going to be used with a limited scope. But as you expand that out, certainly we can evaluate the cost benefit of using in-house labor versus contract labor. We did not get to that level of detail in strategic planning. Since that strategic planning session, we've talked with Public Works and Solid Waste Division about putting together a roadmap that kind of brings some of these different components together in one view. So you can look at a leachate facility and how we address that, and gas collection and some of the different things that we talk about individually. Because I'm not a proponent for bringing individual things to you piecemeal and you don't understand how it fits into the bigger pie. So we're working on that, and we'll have that in the next couple of months to share. But what I thought was clear from the strategic planning was, the idea of using ARPA funds to offset that capital to reduce that overall cost, whether it be government furnished equipment and operated by a contractor, or whether it be equipment we own and operate with in-house labor, we would sort that out later as we talk about that expanded scope. We're expecting a 10 to 12 month lead time on these equipment purchases. And it's pretty clear that the cost of this type of thing is going up dramatically. But other than that, there's no time sensitivity to this. So if the assembly said, you know what, we want to pump the brakes, we want to pull back, and we want to wait some time, certainly there's no reason you can't choose to do that. The ARPA funds are available for, I think, expenditures into 2025 or 2026. But we had this discussion. So I think what Mr. 2 is challenging is, should we be in the equipment business in the first place? And I think that's a valid question to ask. But what we're looking at is, in this case, is a little over $1 million worth of equipment. We have to figure out, do you want to bury that capital cost in a contract that's going to be borne by the enterprise fund? Or do you want to offset that by acquiring it through grants, which requires the borough to buy it? And then figure out how do you want to staff it ultimately down the line as you expand it to these different services that you could use an excavator for example. Is that, sorry, that was a little bit longer.
No,
but
no,
I think it's
thank
important
you,
for the
yeah.
folks out here that weren't there on Saturday to
It's a
understand.
hybrid model. What this would create is a hybrid model where I don't think we would go out and spend $1, $5, $10, or $20 million on equipment typically, but because it's a grant and because there's not very many ways for us to spend it, it's food for thought. So I heard you say we could potentially hire a private industry to supply the operators. And I imagine if we could do that, we could probably put out for bid where they provide the maintenance as well. Like if we wanted to put out a bid where somebody provide the operators and the maintenance, that would probably work out too, I imagine.
Assemblyperson Hale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So to me, it seems like we're buying this equipment, we're buying this equipment with the federal dollars. So we're saving a bunch of money. We're saving $1 million right there that we don't have to tax our taxpayers for. The federal government is taxing all of us to death, and they're handing a little bit of it back to the Matsu Borough. And we can use that money to buy this equipment that, by the estimates provided in the IM, is going to save the landfill a ton of money over the time period. And I think the argument about whether we contract out the labor for that or we don't, while important, is also just a drop in the bucket when you consider the savings that we're going to have by, number one, buying this equipment with federal dollars, and number two, having this equipment on site at the landfill to tear up these tires that are really space consuming inside the cells. So I just think this is a really good idea.
Deputy Mayor.
Through the mayor, I do think this is a good idea. I just have a little bit of concern over Assemblymember 2's parent quote that was lower than what than what we've got here. And I wonder if maybe we can't just have somebody call down to BSI as well and see what they would quote just the general public rather than a public entity for this equipment. Maybe we're overpaying.
Okay, further discussion from the assembly. Yes, Assemblyperson Hours, go ahead.
Thank you, through the mayor. I mean, I would just say this is just buying the equipment. Just using the ARP funds to do it, and this whole debate over how we contract out to it, we can have that. But get the piece of equipment and do it. Jesse can get on the phone and say he's Bob Smith and ask him. I think that's not a bad idea.
You got your homework assignment, sir. Further discussion by the assembly. Yes, Assemblyperson McKee.
Yeah, I like Moki's statement that he doesn't want us to be in the equipment owning business. I agree with that. However, if we have the leeway to, make it, as somebody said, a hybrid, so that we could actually bring private enterprise in to do the maintenance or the work. So I think that's a win-win situation for us and the price and private industry as well. So I'm for that.
Further discussion. And I know we have objection, right, to this passing of this AM. So Madam Clerk, would you take the roll, please, for the voting?
If I can get everybody to vote. Assemblymember Bernier,
Yes.
it passed with Assemblymember 2 opposed.
Okay. Madam Clerk, is that the only ones we had pulled? Okay. So now, you want to take a break? Sure. Oh, I'm sorry. Does the assembly want to take a break? I guess we're getting left, so we're taking a break.
For 10 minutes?
Yeah, right. we're going to go ahead and call the meeting back to order. And we have reached the unfinished business, and Madam Clerk, we do have some unfinished business, so ask you to read that into the record, please.
Resolution 21-135, a resolution directing administration to establish a pilot program and provide road service area services via a time and material contract structure in Big Lake Road Service Area Number 21 for the period of July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2023.
Amendment that had been proposed by Assembly Member 2. And so that's what we will be dealing with first. Yes, go ahead, sir.
Point of order, Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Wasn't there a secondary amendment to the primary amendment as well?
I didn't see that, but you could be right, sir.
I think no one could decide on the exact wording of that secondary amendment, so it was abandoned at that time and we postponed, if I remember correctly.
I do believe that's correct, but let me look back in my previous notes. Bear with me.
So did it, that secondary amendment?
As the
then
mover
is-
of that amendment, I don't recall there being any action withdrawing it.
So as far as you're concerned, your memory is that it's still on the floor? Okay, thank you. You want to be sure and address it correctly.
I have it crossed off.
So what is the best way to handle it then?
If Assemblymember Sumner wanted to move it again, he could.
Okay,
Or we're on the primary amendment.
okay.
I got Assemblymember 2.
Who is that?
Assemblymember 2.
2, okay. Alrighty. Assembly Member 2, did you have a comment regarding your amendment?
I would just like to vote amendment number, this amendment down.
Okay. Further discussion from the assembly? She said no. Yeah, thank you. Okay. So is there objection? I guess there is objection, right? So the clerk will ask you to go ahead and vote.
Point of order.
Yes.
Are we on the main motion?
No, we're on the amendment.
Oh, okay.
We're on the amendment, and Assemblyperson 2 has an objection for it passing. He asked us to vote no. And so, since that's an objection, then the clerk has, yeah, okay?
If I can get everybody to vote on the primary amendment. Assemblymember McKee, oh, you just did. Okay, thank you. Assemblymember Bernier.
See back from break. Yep, here it comes.
Assemblymember Bernier, we're on the primary amendment on Resolution 21-135.
Yes.
Thank you.
Did you catch that?
Yeah, I heard you say yes. It has failed with Assemblymember 2, Hale, Nowers, and Yent opposed, and Assemblymember Bernier, Sumner, and McKee in favor. Now we're on the main motion.
Okay, discussion on the main motion, which is, let me get back to my piece of paper here. Resolution 21-135. Is there any objection? Yes. Okay, we have objection. So Madam Clerk, oh, did you want to, or you have objection or discussion? Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask, I mean, we've heard this is, I'd just like the sponsor to speak. Are you planning to ask us to vote this down so we can move forward with the task force?
Yes.
Yes, you're going to ask us to vote it down?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, further discussion? Okay, Madam Clerk, I think we're ready to vote.
I'm actually not.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Would you, Assemblymember Nauer, say again what you just said? Because I'm going to end up not voting for, not knowing what I'm voting for.
Okay. Did you want to address it or you want me to?
I believe Assemblymember 2 is asking us to vote against this so that it will be done, and we will move forward with the task force idea, which is on for public hearing in 2 weeks.
So if I vote if I vote no, I'm voting for the task force, basically, essentially. Okay. So if I vote no, I'm voting for the task force.
Okay. Further discussion? Okay, Madam Clerk, I think we're ready then to vote.
If I can get everybody to vote. Assemblymember Bernier.
No.
It failed unanimously, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Alrighty, so we are done with unfinished business, new business, then. Correct, ma'am?
It is. So introduction for public hearing on March 1st is ordinance 22015, ordinance 22018, ordinance 22019 with accompanying resolution 22021, ordinance 22020, and ordinance 22021.
I move to introduce the legislation as read into the record by the clerk and set the public hearings for March 1st, 2022. And I move to divide the question and separate out ordinance 22-015.
Thank you. So there is a main motion to divide the question to remove ordinance 22-015 to be considered separately. So that, we will have the discussion on that question of dividing the question.
So ordinance 22015, if I could, Madam Mayor.
Sure.
Ordinance 22015 is the ordinance amending the Historic Preservation Commission. Assemblymember Sumner has asked to divide the question to take the introduction of that particular piece and all the rest of the introductions separately. That is the motion that is before you right now.
Okay. Okay, yes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through the mayor, I'd just like to ask the assembly member why we're dividing the question. I don't necessarily have an objection to it.
Okay. Deputy Mayor?
I just had some objection to some of the language in this, and I think it needs maybe a little bit more work. So I was going to postpone it one further meeting, essentially.
Okay, so it sounds like if this motion passes, then he would have, on dividing the question, when that come before you, he has some further insight that he'd like to bring up. Okay? And further discussion on the motion to set for public hearing on the 1st of March, except for splitting out the ordinance 22-015.
We're on the motion to divide the question. That's all that's in front of us right now.
Okay. Objection to dividing the question? Okay. I don't see any objection, so we now, so do we deal with this split off first or the main motion of setting all the rest of them to public hearing?
You would take all the rest of the basically it would be section A, which would be the introduction of everything but ordinance 22015.
Okay. So the motion before you is to take everything except 22015 and set for public hearing on March 1st. Discussion on that motion. Any objection to that motion? No? Okay. So now we're back to ordinance 22-015. Deputy Mayor.
Madam Mayor, I move to have ordinance 22-015 introduced on March 15th instead of March 1st.
Can I get clarification?
Yes, clarification?
If I could ask for clarification, Assemblymember Sumner, are you asking for us to bring it back for introduction? Or are you asking for the public hearing to happen on March 15th?
The public hearing.
Okay. So everybody hear what his reasoning was for splitting the motion? Yes, Assemblyperson Hale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It doesn't sound like this is time sensitive, so I don't see any reason why we can't do this.
Okay. Is there any objection to setting the public hearing for ordinance 22-015 to the 15th of March of 2022? Seeing no objection, then that is passed. Okay, the vacancy report is next. Deputy Mayor?
I move to approve the mayor's recommendations as follows. Animal Care and Regulation Board, Daniel Bowen, Sally Pollen. Board of Ethics, Todd Smolden. Labor Relations Board, Daniel Bowen. Local Emergency Planning Committee, Tom Covington. Plating Board, Eric Cohen. Port Commission, Dane Crowley. Midway RSA number 9, Mark Mobley.
Is there discussion? Is there objection? Hearing none, then the vacancy report has been approved. We do not have any referrals, correct, Madam Clerk? And we are now at reconsideration. Madam Clerk, would you please read the legislation into the record?
AM 2211, approval of the road service area road improvement project list for 2022.
Okay, Assemblymember Bernier, do you have a motion to reconsider?
I do.
Okay,
Yes, I'd like to amend.
oh, you have to reconsider.
I move
first.
to,
Ron, the clerk tells me.
Yes,
you
ma'am.
need to- The clerk says that you need to make a motion to reconsider first, and then we will move in
okay,
to what your reconsideration is, so,
I move to reconsider
okay. All right. Is there?
AM 22-011.
Is that the right one? Okay. All righty. Discussion on the motion to reconsider. Is there any objection to the motion to reconsider? Okay. So hearing no objection and the reconsideration has passed, we are now on the main motion, which means the legislation, that whole legislation package is up for discussion, amendment, and then we will need to vote on the main motion again. And so Assemblyperson Bernier, I will ask you to, I think you had a motion that you wanted to make
Yes,
at this time. Go ahead.
I move to amend AM 22-011 Meadow Lakes RSA project list by inserting Gunflint Trail back on the RIP list.
Okay, thank you. Discussion? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I intend to support Mr. Bernier on this, but I had a question for staff. I believe at the last meeting, it was mentioned that this road had been removed from the RIP list by the administration after the RSA had approved it because it was going to be an upgrade of a non-compliant road to compliance. Is that correct?
Go ahead.
Through the
sir.
mayor to Mr. Hale. The borough by policy does not upgrade unmaintained roads or roads that are not certified for maintenance. And the reason that we do that is there's, first of all, there's hundreds of them. They're left behind from an era when there was no enforcement in road construction conditions. And the cost of upgrading those roads to current standards would probably be in the hundreds of millions of dollars. It also sends a message to our developers that it's not necessary for them to build the road because the public money will be used to build those roads later after they sell their lots and move away. So that's why by policy, we don't upgrade unmaintained or uncertified roads.
Yes,
No,
follow
thank
up,
you.
sir.
So I understand the policy, especially back in a time when, we didn't have anything necessarily controlling the construction of roads. But now that we have the subdivision construction manual in place with the requirements, I think if an RSA wants to bring a non-compliant road into compliance, and with their own RSA funds, I think that that's something that we should allow them to do, and that's just my opinion on the matter. So thank you very much.
Okay. Further discussion? Yes. Somebody.
Just a question, and I'm sorry.
This is Ron.
Okay, Ron, I just recognize Assemblyperson Mowers, and so can you wait a minute, sir, and then I'll
Okay.
recognize you. Thank you.
So you have all these non-compliant roads. How do they, if the RSA doesn't fund it, how do they typically come into compliance? Who pays to do that?
Through the mayor too, Assemblywoman Hours, the road maintenance is handled in a number of different manners, and it probably is entirely site dependent. Some of these roads aren't maintained, especially in District 7 throughout the winter because the properties are accessed for recreational purposes by snow machines or other means. And in the core area, it's more likely that there's full-time residences on these roads. And in those cases, typically a resident will provide whatever level of maintenance is necessary for their own needs. A lot of times there'll be one of the neighbors that will have a heavy piece of equipment that can handle heavy snowfalls. For more minor snowfalls, they may use pickup truck plows, or they may not actually provide maintenance at all.
I think I was trying to ask, like, I get the impression this road is substandard, and I don't know if it's width or base or whatever. That's an expensive deal to fix that. So
Yes.
if you've got to do that work, who's on the hook right now if the RSA isn't?
It's an unconstructed road, which means that all of those things that you mentioned are problems for it. It's not made out of normal road material. It's made out of what we would describe as contaminated or frost susceptible material that turns to mush in the springtime. It doesn't typically, unless it happens to be in an area where there's real high quality gravel, but most places don't have that kind of material. This particular road has problems with its width. It has problems with drainage, and it has problems with right-of-way. It meanders in and out of the right-of-way. So there's an enormous amount of problems here. The residents that have lived out there for years probably could claim prescriptive rights to continue using it, and we probably could claim those kind of rights as well to maintain it for portions that have been in use for a long period of time, but only typically for the driving surface, especially where there's no constructed ditch. There's no space in places like that to build appropriate drainage facilities. So this proposition is very costly. There are literally hundreds and hundreds of roads around the borough that are like this, that were never constructed and would be extraordinarily expensive to take on.
Okay.
Follow up. I'm still trying to get at, I lived on a substandard road. It had trees were the base of it, old trees. So if the RSA doesn't take it over to make it a compliant road, like how do these roads get into, I'm not opposed to the RSA if they really want to spend their money that way, but what's the other method that all these substandard roads get brought up to compliance?
Yes, ma'am. I understand the question now. There are multiple methods to upgrade a road like this. The borough offers a local improvement district process where the borough will essentially loan the residents the funds to upgrade the road properly, and then we can take it over for maintenance, and the cost of that is borne by the residents through a special assessment over time. And I apologize if the technical terminology I'm using is not precise because I'm not in the finance department, but it it is a process like that where the borough essentially will take that money back over time to pay for that. There are other options as well, and we've seen this done in other locations. Sometimes residents that are there have capability and equipment to do the construction work that's necessary themselves. And what they'll do is come and obtain a permit from us and go do that work themselves. We frequently, in those kinds of cases, provide engineering assistance to them to help them understand exactly what's missing on that road and what needs to be replaced. And those residents then go obtain the services of sometimes a local engineering firm. Sometimes they have the skill to do it without local engineers, and they'll construct it with materials that they can acquire locally at low expense.
Okay, Assemblyperson Benir, go ahead. Thank you for waiting.
Hi. I live on a approved road, certified road, and Gunflint actually a better road than what I live on. It's a main thoroughway into the backside of Meadow Lakes Loop. It goes to King Arthur. The emergency access route comes right off there. And at the end of it is a gravel pit. That whole ridge is gravel. It wouldn't take much to actually get it certified. And like I said, there's a lot of certified roads that are a lot worse shape than Gunflint is. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
Through the mayor to Director Dolan, did I hear you say that we would have prescriptive rights to a road that's outside of the right of way? Are you saying that we could claim adverse possession?
We might,
or-
and I would prefer if the borough attorney described that to you, if you would like a description.
Go ahead, sir.
Yes. There are lots of places in the borough where the right-of-way either goes slightly outside or completely outside of the actual traveled way, and either a section line, a right-of-way, a patent reservation, a platted road. It's not terribly infrequent, especially as you get outside the core area. And so, yeah, there are legal standards for when you would be able to apply, to assert prescriptive rights, and there are limitations on what you can assert prescriptive rights over and the actual width of those prescriptive rights. But yes, it's entirely possible, especially when a road has been in existence and actually used by the public for a period exceeding either 7 or 10 years, depending on the circumstance.
The big caution on that from my perspective as a operator and maintainer of roads is that you typically can't acquire space for facilities that haven't existed in the past. And so that's where you really run into a problem with prescriptive rights. If we need to install ditches that almost all roads need to move water away from the driving surface, and you didn't have those in the past, which an unconstructed road would not have those, you cannot obtain the space that's necessary for 2-lane traffic and drainage ditches.
Wouldn't we also have difficulty making that claim since that road is not maintained by the borough? No? Okay.
No, there's a specific state statute that says that the creation or operation of a right-of-way does not obligate the borough to do any type of maintenance on it. The question is whether or not it was used adverse to the landowner's possession, open, notorious, hostile, actual, and continuous for a statutory period. So if somebody's just driving across it and you don't put a gate up in time to stop people from doing it, the borough can. And again, as everything Director Dolan said was true. It may not be enough, it may not be wide enough, but the borough can, in certain circumstances, acquire prescriptive rights.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just, just as kind of a final comment on this, again, I'm going to say, I support Mr. Bernier looking out for his RSA board who asked for this, asked to spend their own money this way. And, we're here on the verge of standing up a task force on partially focused on substandard roads. And this is one of the ways that RSAs can improve their substandard roads to conditions which would make it so that the borough would perform maintenance. And a lot of folks, live on a substandard road that's within the RSA boundaries and are paying the RSA mill rate for maintenance that they do not receive because they are past the portion of the road that is up to the maintenance standards. And so, you know, if one of my RSA boards came to me and said, you know, and you can imagine I've got a lot of substandard roads in my district. And if one of my RSA boards came to me and said, hey, we want to spend our own money to bring this road into compliance so we can get maintenance on it, I would absolutely do the exact same thing Mr. Bernier is doing right now.
Okay. Further discussion? Okay, yes.
Yeah, I would.
I'd like to mention as well that there is full right of way intact on that 60-foot wide on Gunflint, and it is being plowed.
Okay, thank you. Assemblyperson McKee?
So you're saying that the folks in this RSA want to do this and they want to tax themselves to do that and all that kind of thing? Because I had a call like that from another road service area saying, we've been talking to the borough for like years and we want our mill rate increased for our RSA and the borough hasn't done that for us. Why does that happen? Is it something like we're talking about right here?
Okay.
We're on amendment right now.
Okay, we're on the amendment right now, but I would recommend you would talk to these two gentlemen here after the meeting.
Oh,
Okay,
Right.
thank you. Because discussion should be just on the amendment regarding Gunflint Road. Okay, further discussion on the amendment. Is there any?
I have one more thing I'd like to add.
Sure, go ahead, sir.
Yes, there's a lot of land available out that way too, as far as building and bringing in new taxable base. That is really a main thoroughfare for the Meadow Lakes area, Meadow Lakes Loop and stuff, and that area is growing. And the further out there, you'll do good by bringing that upgraded.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Further discussion. Is there objection to the amendment passing? Okay, I don't see any, so the amendment has passed. Now we're back to the main motion regarding, okay, Deputy Mayor?
Madam Mayor, on RSA number 16, priority status number 14, I moved to strike Hot Showers Drive to Boyd Drive. And the reason is it was struck from RSA 23, and we actually had quite a bit of testimony against this. I did talk to somebody on the RSA 16 board as well, and they had just missed striking this. I know it's not a funded project, but I didn't see a reason to leave it on that list.
So are you removing it or are you adding it back?
Removing Hot Showers to Boyd Road.
Okay. Now I give the clerk a minute here to find it. You found it? Okay. Okay, you want to go ahead, or have you discussed it enough, or do you have further comment on it, sir? Do you have further comment, or did you felt you discussed it enough? Okay, further discussion on, yes. Assemblyperson
I would just
Howard.
note RSA 16 also crosses into District 2, and I have spoken to them about this project, and that's a fair representation that they, it just is still on the list, but it's not something that's on their priority list.
Okay, further discussion, yes, Assemblyperson Hale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to thank Mr. Sumner for his action there.
Okay. Further discussion. Okay, is there objection to the amendment? Okay, if not, then the amendment passes. Further discussion or action on the main motion? Assemblyperson Howard.
I just have some questions that came up about the RIP in Big Lake, and I know folks are here for that. There was two issues that were raised, and I wonder if staff or administration can speak to it. The idea that we would pay a lot more for the RFPs because we'd be going over 25,000. Is that actually an issue with the way that this took a bunch of projects that were funded at 25 or estimated and lumped them into 400,000? So is there any concern with having to go out for RFPs for everything? And then there was a reference to extra engineering costs. Is there any sort of the way this RIP has been changed that there would be extra engineering costs?
Go ahead, sir.
Terry Dolan, Director of Public Works, through the mayor. So any tasks that we would perform that would require engineering under the $25,000 limit would also require engineering over, and vice versa. So engineering is not required by dollar amount, but it's required based on the task that you're performing. Essentially, the line is, and it's not really this simple, but essentially the line is, if you're doing maintenance, then you don't have to have engineering. If you're doing construction, state statute requires you to have engineering. So for example, on Papoose Twins, there are certain sites that we could perform maintenance actions that would improve the condition of the road. There are other sites, like the top of the Blind Hill, where significant excavation has to occur, where we would have to do construction. No matter how we approach this, we will have to have engineering for that site. So there's no difference in the terms of the engineering. In terms of the cost, over the last, it's been more than 10 years now since the Blue Ribbon Task Force that Mayor DeVilbiss put in place. We've been executing projects at or below $25,000 with funds that the Assembly approves in the capital list. They were originally called reconditioned gravel roads, and we changed the name of that about 6 years ago or something like that to reconditioned roads. And that's how we executed small projects. And the reason what's magic about the $25,000 level is below that level, generally you don't have to pay the Alaska version of Davis-Bacon wages. And so your wage costs are smaller below that. Frequently with contractors that are already on site, our maintenance contractors, many of them have good construction capabilities. We were able to get really valuable projects out of those contractors that were already there working anyway for less than $25,000. We did a project last summer on Papoose Twins, actually it was 2 summers ago now, where it was a $24,000 project that most contractors that looked at what we did estimated the value of it somewhere around the $55,000 level, because we were able to use short periods of time that the contractor at the site had available to do an hour here, an hour there of work out there over the period of a summer. And that's what resulted in us not having to put mud mats down on Papoose Twins this last spring. So there is a lot of value to being able to execute at or below the $25,000 level. But just because there's $100,000, say, being spent on Papoose this year, doesn't mean that I'll spend that in a way that's not frugal. We're still going to spend it in the best way that we know how. It is likely that you'll see us do a project that will require engineering, because some of the things I can't fix without that legally. But things that we can fix below the $25,000 level, we will do those in as frugal a manner as we possibly can. Did that answer your question?
Sure.
Thank you. I just want to say there was concerns expressed that this body doesn't listen to RSAs. And I just want to put on the record that in District 2, I heard from both my RSAs about the time and materials contract, and they were not supportive of that at all. And so I could not support going forward with that. As a policy, I think each assembly member to his own or her own. I just want on the record that for District 2, I very much value what the RSAs have to say. And I don't want this in any way to send a message to the RSAs I represent or to the big board that I do not, as an assembly member, respect and value the input those RSAs give. But this is RSA 21, and it's not in the Palmer area, but I wanted to get that on the record. Thank you.
Okay, Deputy Mayor, you had a comment?
Yeah, through the mayor to Director Dolan. So would digging out like a small section of, muddy or muck out of a road and building it up with gravel, would that be maintenance or construction?
Through the mayor to Assemblyman Sumner. So I think you could make arguments both ways. If it was a small segment and it wasn't particularly costly, we would dig out unusable road material that has become contaminated over time and replace it, typically on top of a geosynthetic fabric with material that is acceptable. So I don't know. I think you can make an argument for it either way. We would typically, if it was small, call it maintenance.
Follow-ups? No? Further discussion on the amendment? Yes, go ahead, sir.
I'd like to make a point as far as Gunflint goes, that we've had $150,000 spent on engineering and right of way already on that, and it should come up and be considered there. Thank you.
Okay, so further discussion? Okay, the main motion is before you as amended. Any objection to passing the main motion? I don't hear any objections, so the main motion has passed under the reconsideration with a number of amendments. Mr. Attorney, have we heard any update on executive session?
Nope, I've been watching all night, checking my email every 10 minutes or so.
Okay,
We've got just about 3 hours left in the day and no opinion yet from the Superior Court on the redistricting. So you'll have an email probably tomorrow morning at some point. If it shows up at midnight tonight, I won't be awake. I'll email it out to everybody in the morning, and with a little narrative, I'll take a spin through it and tell you what I see. And
okay.
are we at comments now?
Yep, we're
Okay,
comments.
so I will let the assembly know that the normal court rules establish a 30-day appeal period. And I talked with outside counsel this morning, today, before the meeting here about that, because I didn't see any rules modifying that. And she verified, no, there are no rules. However, apparently at the State of the Judiciary address that just happened in Juneau, Chief Justice Winfrey made a comment that they already had a briefing schedule in mind for redistricting should an appeal be filed. So it's entirely possible the Supreme Court's going to issue an order without anybody asking, saying, hey, that 30-day deadline is less. If that happens, I'll get with the mayor and manager, see if we need assembly direction. I don't tend to think so. I think the direction was pretty clear, especially if we prevail and they appeal, we're just going to be responding to the appeal. But I'll put an email together, and if I think we need a quick meeting on it, I'll talk to the mayor about calling a special meeting. We'll get a date with the clerk and inform everybody. But if the opinion rolls in tonight, I'll email it out to everybody tomorrow.
Mr. Manager, any comments?
Nothing, Madam Mayor.
Madam Clerk, anything? Okay. Assemblyperson McKee, do you have any parting comments?
No, only pretty much to echo what Assemblyperson Nowers talked about. The RSA is not feeling that they're being heard, included, being made part of this thing. So basically they go through, a lot of work to get something done and then feel that they're not being listened to and included. And I think that needs to change.
So I would like to talk about tipping floors and landfills. And what I would say is if you've never seen a tipping floor, you just go to Anchorage and they have it there. And it's a pretty neat facility. It definitely stores the garbage. It also segregates the garbage. And if you look at what we do at our landfill, we put all the stuff down at base, and then we have a contractor pick through it with an excavator and he tracks over and he puts it in another bucket, another dumpster, and then they haul that dumpster off over to the metal or over to the C&D or wherever they're going to haul it to. And I think a tipping floor would be a big asset to our community because we have, like I said, probably 3 weeks that the landfill's closed to all the contractors. And that's all your waste haulers. And that's where all of our where the revenue from the landfill really comes from, is the waste haulers. That's the money. So when those guys have their trucks full and then they try to go to work the next day, that's a burden on them. Let's say that their truck's all the way out here in Palmer and they're grabbing garbage. Now their truck's full, so they want to stop by the landfill and it, but they can't because it's windy. So what they do is drive all the way out, let's say to Craig Taylor, which is out on the Parks Highway. That's where one of the haulers are. So in the morning, as long as it's not windy, they get to drive all the way back to Palmer to drop that garbage off. So I think a tipping floor would be a huge asset to our community and to our borough's facilities. Thank you.
Sure, thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'll be brief. We're looking at this, standing up these two or one board that's gonna consider these two subjects. And I'd just like to say that, you know, if we want an advisory opinion on either one of these subjects, we already have the Long Range Transportation Advisory Board and the big board of the RSAs to give us all the advisory opinions we could want on road issues. So I just thought, in any case, we'll be discussing it next week. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Assemblyperson Benair online, do you have parting comments, sir?
I don't know what coming in. I'd just like to say thank you, everyone. Have a good night and be safe out there. Love your family. Thank you.
Assemblyperson Yuan?
No, ma'am.
Okay, Assemblyperson Nowers, parting comments?
Now I know more people in Big Lake than I ever knew before. But no, I am very glad to see this set for a public hearing. We were criticized for the consent agenda, and I think rightly so. You shouldn't have something on the consent agenda that takes you an hour to debate, and sometimes you don't know it's going to be like that. But if you have an inkling, I think just public process wise. So I'm glad to see that for public hearing. I share Assemblymember Hale's thoughts on this task force. I mean, I was on the phone, so that makes it difficult at the last meeting, but I had no idea what we were proposing. And at that meeting, we had a couple people come up and mention substandard roads and impassable roads, which are different issues. And then all of a sudden we're doing a task force and it's like, where did that come from? So that was just, I didn't say it. I was on the phone thinking it, but I think rather than go forward with a task force, we can tap the knowledge that we have and then see if there's something we really want to delve into. I'm really happy to see we have a DOT office in the Valley now. I'm looking forward to stopping in over there and maybe having some conversations with them. Going down to Juneau for the AML conference as well. I'll do what I can to, lock them all in a room and get a solution out of them on the PFD. So I'll wave my magic wand. And just
how long you gonna be down
yeah.
there?
And on the tipping floor, I was over at Matt Valley Rebuild, which is over in Wasilla, and that guy has got windows, perfectly new faucets, an entire sink, all sorts of construction material that he's keeping out of the landfill, a lot of it in great shape or workable shape. So I just, again, I'd like to talk about that tipping floor with staff, if that's something we could do and shunt some of that stuff over to him, because he's all in the private sector, but he's providing a service to the Valley to get that stuff out of the landfill and get it reused. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
No comment. Thank
Okay.
you.
Anybody that I missed? Everybody get a chance to do comments? Alrighty, folks, let's wrap her up and go home. Good night. Meeting's adjourned.